Good afternoon and welcome to the Rotary Club of Fort Worth. Today is Friday, May 31st, and I'm very glad to see all of you here today. To start our program off, I have some unfortunate news. On May 20th, 2024, our dear friend and brother Rotarian Richard Knight passed away. To many of us, he was phenomenal. And I have to say, he was the spirit of Rotary in that he always put service above self. He is dearly missed, and I'd like to take a moment of silence, please, in his honor. Godspeed, friends. Start our program today with the invocation with Mr. Scott Hackler, founder and CEO, Hello de Santo, followed immediately after by Wesley Gentle playing the national anthem. Wesley Gentle, Director and President, Fort Worth Arts. Please rise and join us in this.
Pray with me. God of fear, God of the night, God of the expectation. You visited shepherds in the night with songs and sights of joy. In all of our nights, turn us towards hope, because hope might just keep us alive. Amen. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Wesley. All right, next up, visitor welcome. Jerry Shuley, Assistant VP of Development and Strategic Partnerships at Texas A&M Foundation. There it is, the whoops. Come on up, Jerry.
Thank you, Kurt. First, I want to say my apologies if I mispronounce your name. I do apologize. So, good morning. So our guests today are Garrett Henley and Kevin Chakowski, which are guests of Kirk Driver. Carol Cabers, which is a guest of Sean Snell. Leslie Botvinson, which is a guest of Michelle Krim. Tanika Quebec, which is a guest of Rosa Bordeja. Gail Snyder, who is a guest of Karen Derrick. Annika Nelson, a guest of Greg Carter. And Kristen Baker, a guest of Mark Kimball. So if you will welcome our guests. Thank you for being here.
All right, what happened? We always applaud when we're not supposed to applaud in the middle, and this time we did it the other way. All right. So, to all our guests here, you Rotarians, you know the drill. For the guests here, Rotary has this thing called the four-way test. And it's something we try to filter everything we do through. And if it doesn't pass this test? Well, we try not to think, say, or do those things. So if you will, please repeat along with me. Number one, is it the truth? Number two, is it fair to all concerned? Number three, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And number four, will it be beneficial to all concerned? And now I'd like to bring up Mr. John Wright, sorry, not White, Wright, President, Simple Leadership Strategies with our newscast.
The good book says there is a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. This is not a time to laugh, so I beg your understanding and grace, because I will not be saying anything funny about what happened this week in the news. I want to take the 3 minutes that we have for the newscast to pay a little bit more tribute to Richard Knight and to respectfully make a request to all of you who knew him. Richard was exceptional. Everybody knows that. And I feel awkward saying that because this is a room of exceptional people. But those of you that knew him know what I'm talking about. He truly was an exceptional person. I had the good fortune of having him in my home at least 6 times. We have, me and Chris, I have a good memory of being at a little cigar lounge at a minority business owner person who was in the running for that. That was a memorable evening downstairs not 6 months ago. Fortunately for me, it always involved whiskey. He liked whiskey as much as I do. It was not 3 weeks ago, I shook his hand and I said, we are overdue for a cocktail because it had been 6 months. And if any of you remember, when I finish my newscast, I normally say the same thing after I talk about the weather. I say this: if there is a friend or a family member that you have not seen or spoken to lately, this would be a good weekend to do something about that. Unfortunately, in Richard's case, I didn't follow my own advice. I said we need to get together, and of course we didn't, and it had been 6 months. So here is my respectful request. My guess is that everybody in this room has a Richard Knight in their life, and by that I mean a friend or somebody who's exceptional, somebody that matters, and it's been 6 months or more since you've spoken to them. And I would ask that you would commit to at least one time, hopefully it actually would become a habit. Reach out to that person, call them, visit them, and just in your heart, make that in honor of Richard Knight. Thank you, President Kirk.
Thank you very much, John. All right, next up we have grant awards. Larry Anfin, come on up and give us some grants. It's the best part of the show.
No, it's not. No? I don't giving money is it? Yeah. Judy couldn't be here today, so I'm filling in for her. I have the privilege of giving some grants from our club to these 3 worthy organizations. And our first grant today goes to the Women's Center of Tarrant County, in the amount of $5 for their Play It Safe program, serving kids during the academic school year. Accepting the check for the organization is Catherine Esser, Assistant Director of Research and Training Services. I guess Jasmine's not coming up here. Are you coming up? No, you're not. Okay. Well, Jasmine's here also. Jasmine Rose Polon is Director of Grant Administration. They don't make a speech. Congratulations. Yeah, no speeches. I made that mistake once and let somebody get behind the microphone. So. Our next grant goes to Link Ed in the amount of $4,500 for 4 iPads and diagnostic software to help students with learning differences. Accepting the check for the organization is Lloyd Day, Executive Director. Okay, and he, along with him is Brenda Worley, Associate Director. Okay, Carol, we saved the best for last here. The third grant goes to the Center for Transforming Lives in the amount of $5,000 for playground equipment for their new facility. Accepting the check for the organization is Carol Klossick, CEO. Attending with her is Chris Campfield.
y'all, Larry, come up, stay up here. The rest of y'all come back up here. Let's get a picture, please. Group photo. Group hug. All right, you're filming. There you go. Thank you, all of y'all. Congratulations to each of you. Thank you, Larry. All right, we got a couple first readings here. Secretary Maddie Compton, retired federal prosecutor, come on up. Oh, goodness. Okay. I like your new shoes.
Thank you. I'm setting a style trend. Good afternoon. We have 5 first readings today. The proposed members are Nick Dumbald. His title is engineering consultant. His company is All Risk Engineering. His classification, engineering consulting, and his proposer is Ed McLean. Our second proposed member is Carol Kibbers. Her title is Senior Vice President, Human Resources with the company of Ben E. Keith. Her classification is food and beverage, and her proposer is immediate past President Sean Snell. The third proposed new member is Cecilia Marugo. Her title is Associate Professor. Her company is Charlton State University, Fort Worth. Her classification, higher education, and her proposal is Rachel Capua. The fourth proposed new member is Laura Faulkner Pritchett. Title, Account Executive, Company IR, Classification, Unified Communications Systems. The proposer is Don Click. And our final proposed new member is Dylan Smith. His title is Managing Partner with the company of Smith, Bachman, and Ribbit Construction. His classification is construction, and his proposer is Joe Michaels. If no written objections are received in the Rotary office by June the 7th, these proposals will be given a second reading and voted on by the club.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. All right. Man, I thought we had some second readings. Okay, just firsts. We got a couple new blue badges, though, so that's always a treat. Bruce Frankel, are you here? Bruce? Come on up here. Fat, come on up here. Both of you. Regina here? All right. Bruce, give me that red one. I'll swap you out. There's Regina. Congratulations. There she is. Congratulations. Thank you. All right. We got some more red badgers out here. I know where you are. I've seen you. You know how to get it. Chris, where are you at? Chris Harris, good job on getting a greeting done today. You were very greeterly. So, all right. And on to the main event. Chairperson of the day is Ty Stimson, partner at Varghese Somerset LLC. That's a law firm. Ty, come on up here, and why don't you introduce our guest for us?
Well, before I do the introduction, I do want to acknowledge I did have a guest today, Mr. Mike Wilson. We don't have enough lawyers in the house. So I brought another family lawyer for us. I gave Mac a hard time already. I think I'm being trolled as a Baylor Bear because we all know Mac's opinion about Baylor over the years. But I have the privilege of introducing him today as our guest speaker. Now, if I were a betting man, I would wager that most of us already are familiar with Mac, and you probably even formed an opinion about his opinions one time or another. But Mac is an award-winning sports columnist who has worked for the Star-Telegram for more than 20 years. He has covered or criticized all of the major sports teams in North Texas Texas, including the Rangers, Stars, Mavericks, Cowboys, Horned Frogs, and even the Baylor Bears. Mac's columns spanning a wide range of teams and issues have earned him recognition as one of the top sports columnists in the country. Mac has also served as an adjunct professor in journalism schools at both TCU and SMU. Today, he's bringing his knowledge and commentary on all things sports to Rotary. I'm not sure what topics he'll cover over the next 30 minutes, but one thing's for sure, I know we won't be bored. So let's give Mac a warm Rotary welcome.
All right, thank you very much for having me. Before I say anything else about what my topic du jour is going to be, I wanted to express my sympathies for the loss of your friend. And I know as we all get older, we're going to potentially acquire experiences and hurt like that. And my condolences go out to you, his friends, certainly his family members. And like you said, it's a reminder to all of us that if we have those people in our lives, to reach out to them, just to tell them that we love them, we care about them. The other thing I want to say is how much I appreciate you all extending this invitation to me, because I know Rotary clubs and organizations like that are very important to this community and every other one, because if they didn't exist, I don't think the communities that we have would function as well as they do. Sometimes it's a little bumpy and a little hard, but the fact that you guys give up your time the way you do, there's a lot to be said for that. I don't take it for granted, and I don't think Fort Worth would be the city it is today without that kind of participation, because you're giving your time. And as we all know now, our most precious commodity, other than our bank account, is our time. And I appreciate that significantly. I was told there was going to be a guest appearance fee. Is that just going to be Venmo to me? Is that something like that? No, I'm kidding. When I was asked to do this, I was told about 40 or 50 other people said no because they were busy. And they said, would you come? We don't have anybody else. I was like, yeah, okay, sure. I can't say no. So I agreed to do it. And the topic that they asked me to talk about is something that has actually become very near and dear to my heart, which is when are sports front page news? And typically these days, nobody knows what that means because nobody knows what a front page is. I'm nothing if I am not the source of my own sense of humor, and that is I am keenly aware that the media model that I walked into has changed a lot in the last 15 or 20 years. Shout out to Al Gore for creating the internet on that one. So when are sports, thank you very much, I'll be here all week. So when sports are front page news, as I wrote here at the bottom, way more than they should be, way more. But the reality of it is, especially where we live, it's become an enormous part of our lives to the point where we almost don't even think about it. Because as I've traveled, been lucky enough to travel all the United States and sometimes even the world, I've realized what we in North Texas have to offer and how we've become one of the biggest cities in the United States. Well, we don't really have a big geological hook, you know? We don't have a mountain, we don't have a giant, beautiful God-made lake, we don't have a beach, we don't have an ocean. What we have are mild winters, affordable living, business-first mentality, and to draw people to civic events and to large gatherings, we do sports. And we probably do sports as well as any community in the United States and maybe even the world. How do I click this? How do I click this? Is that it? All right. So the very first people that sports and why sports is the front page news is that how much it impacts our children. And as you can see now, and unfortunately, we have a daughter, my wife and I have a daughter, she's 15, and as I was driving here, I got a phone call from a guy who wants to talk about my daughter being recruited. And my first thought is, okay, how much am I paying you for all of your services? And so I listened to his sales pitch, and you know, the truth is, college youth sports now, probably in the last 15 to 20 years, have become a multi-billion-dollar a year industry. For better or for worse, this is just the way it is. I have a lot of thoughts on this subject. In fact, I could probably do 5 or 6 Rotary Club meetings on just this very topic, but if you think about how much either your children or your grandchildren's lives have been shaped by youth sports and the business of youth sports, it's become a big talking point. Again, I don't always necessarily agree with it, but somebody a long time ago recognized there was an opportunity to make a buck, and they're making a lot of them. So that's one way it's certainly become it. The other one too, and I think a lot of people in this room can speak to this with firsthand experience, is the creation of Title IX. What Title IX has become is not what it was originally intended for. Because I think if you look at Title IX legislation, you would say, what in God's name did that liberal politician do, and why would they sign that piece of government stuff? Well, a lot of people don't know this, but Richard Nixon is the one who made Title IX law, and he was the one that made the EPA a law. It's just how government changes, how politicians change. But I think Title IX has been one of the most significant pieces of legislations and one of the, for the betterment of our society that's been passed in the last 50 years. And the reason is because it has given multiple generations of girls now an opportunity to play sports and to have that as a positive experience in their life. My mom's 85. My mom grew up in Charleston, West Virginia. She's 5'10", so she stuck out like a sore thumb. And she often talks about that when she was playing sports as a little girl, that you were made fun of, and you didn't have an opportunity to play sports. Your thing was you were going to be pretty and thin, so she started smoking when she was 14, and she learned how to do a typewriter. Well, I thought about it when I was teaching a college class at TCU a few years ago. All these girls come in and they'd come from the gym. And we don't think anything of it now, which is terrific. And I know that Title IX has come under a lot of criticism for a variety of reasons, one of which is that it funds a lot of sports, and it puts a lot of athletic departments at high schools and certainly in colleges, universities, in a very challenging situation to fund all of those sports. And again, this is another thing that I could talk about for a month without interruption. It's a strain. It is a strain because they lose money. They do. But for our society, Title IX is a godsend because all these girls now grow up playing and wanting to play sports. And you have to think about this as a long game. This is not just for your children or your grandchildren. This is for great-grandchildren, for generations to come. And that has been one of the most significant things that I've seen that's happened for the betterment of sports, certainly since I started college in 1991. I know it looks like I started college in about 2011. Don't let the looks, betray you, but it's been great. And it's one of those things that's going to continue to be a forefront issue, and I fully support it, even though I know from a cost-benefit standpoint, you'd say, well, wait a minute, Dan, we're losing a lot of money on that. And I would say, yes, you're absolutely right. And we're probably losing a lot of money on a lot of other sports too, other than football and basketball. What else have I talked about here? Oh, this is something that drives me crazy. And this is a little bit of reference to the first one, is how much of our youth sports scene now has morphed into pay for play. Who here has children or grandchildren that made a select team, or my kids made the travel team? That's fantastic. That's amazing how they made it. You know how they made it? Because you wrote a check. I know that now because I wrote that check. Your daughter made select? Yes, because I paid in full. Well, and everybody's, when I've talked to pro athletes about this, it drives them crazy. Everybody's heard about AAU basketball. You talk to pro basketball players, they all hate AAU basketball. You talk to Division I college baseball coaches, they cannot stand travel ball. Even though they theoretically benefit from it, they can't stand it because they think ultimately it's been to the detriment of the young person. Because really whom it benefits is the organization, the coach, and the people running the leagues and the games. I see you nodding your head a lot. I appreciate that. I imagine you have some exposure to this. So that's certainly front page news. And the last one is, this is something that it touches on something else. How many people, we are, in this room, we're the voters. We're the people who go and voted on Tuesday in the runoffs, right? When you go to the polling place and there's 10 people there, even though the people we're voting for are the ones controlling all of our money, right? So usually every couple years, and they do this in cities all over the United States, is there's some bond measure, right? They're going to pass something that approves spending for new sports facilities. How much watchdogging is going on that stuff? Dan, would you like to talk about this? Probably not a lot, and especially now as local news organizations continue to shrink. All these organizations and well-meaning school boards and all these other things are passing all these measures, spending our money for these facility upgrades all over schools all over the United States. That's a significant issue, and unfortunately, it's one of those things, I think when you're busy, when you're younger, 25, 30, and maybe you're starting a family or just out having fun, starting out your career, I don't think you think about it. But when you're 50, and all of a sudden, all you do is stare at your bank account all day, well, that becomes front page news in your mind. Local, state, and economy. So this is a big one for us. Since we don't necessarily drive here in North Texas tourism the way they do in San Francisco and in Chicago and New York City and Miami, where are we going to get tourism dollars from? From events, right? From events that we're going to host. The Final Four, the NBA's All-Star Game, the College Football National Championship Game, NASCAR races, all these different things. And all these different organizations consistently have this sort of quid pro quo thing going on, kind of, which is we'll build the facility, we'll give you a 10th, right? And you pick up the remainder of the check with the idea that it's going to spur all this different growth. Now, I'd be willing to bet if I talked to everybody in this room, I could probably get, I don't know, maybe a 50-50 split on people who agree with those tax measures and some who say they're a waste of money, it's not a good idea. That has directly affected Fort Worth. I've had discussions with city leaders about this very topic a lot, which is, as you've noticed, I think we are now the 11th or 12th largest city in the United States. Is that right now? Okay. So when you look at that list, you'll notice one thing that makes Fort Worth stand out amongst the other 15. We are the only one amongst those 15 that does not have a major pro sports team. None of them. Austin has an MLS team now. Dallas has an MLS team, which is in Frisco. That's a different argument. But the city of Fort Worth made a conscious decision, however many years ago, to say we are not going to get involved in the rat race of building and trying to court professional sports franchises, because their logic is you don't get the bang for your buck. There's a very compelling argument to be made that they're right. The jobs are hourly wage jobs, that they don't really create the kind of cost-benefit analysis in your favor that they sell themselves that they can. And they may not be wrong. Because one thing I have come across is more and more sports I've covered, you can find an economist anywhere to say that, boy, you really need to build that facility, and this is how much money you're going to make if you give the Dallas Cowboys $300 million. You can. And you can make that argument. And you can make the argument in the other direction. And it affects all of us. I can see it in both. It's a very, very difficult subject. And this is something that really has affected us as a city that has grown a lot in the last 20 years. I'm of the mind that we're one of the more underappreciated potential gems in the United States, but we haven't fully realized that potential. Are we going to be able to land a professional sports franchise? Would that do it? Would that push us into a different direction? I don't know, you're nodding your head no. I don't know, I'm inclined to believe, I don't know, because I think anybody who drives in the city of Arlington would say, wow, this is amazing, look at all these cool facilities. But if you drive 5 miles in any direction, you would say, well, I don't really see any big impact here. Arlington spent a lot of money for that, for their entertainment district, and they very much believe in it. Whether or not it's worked is entirely depending on your point of view. A member of their city council told me, if we didn't have those teams and we did not have the tax revenue from those events that we have every week, we would not be able to put money in these roads and this, that, and the other. And I drive around Arlington, I'm like, well, I still see potholes. But if that's what you want it to be, then that's what it is. I think the one thing that we have benefited from, as this city has just morphed into some bastard combination of Los Angeles and Houston on steroids, we haven't put up a dime for that facility, but we do get some of the residual tourism effect whereas Arlington probably doesn't get as much. The clear winner has been Dallas in that, right? That's where everybody goes and stays. Dallas. We get some of it, not to the level that Dallas does. Does Arlington? No, because it doesn't have the hotel space. It doesn't really have the nightlife. It's gotten some of it, but that is something, and it's all over. And it's something that in the next 5 to 10 years, keep your eye on this one, because one thing Texans have done consistently is they will fork over however much money to sports teams to build a facility, all of them. The American Airlines Center is going to be 30 years old here pretty soon, and the lease for the Dallas Mavericks and the Dallas Stars is going to expire, and they're going to want a new building, because that's how long these buildings last now, 30 years. Think about it, you just bought a house, it's in pretty good shape, and you're expected to live in it for 30 years. From a business standpoint, they would say, well, that's insane, but that's modern day sports, and what we're seeing now, all of the United States, in places that never said no, they're starting to say no. Now, that could be an outlier. It could be the exception of the rule. But when Kansas City said no to the Kansas City Chiefs and Kansas City Royals for bond measures that would have given them umpteen hundreds of millions of dollars, I about fell out of my chair. I'm like, Kansas City said no? The Chiefs are winning. Taylor Swift is going to Kansas City, and you just said no? It just happened in Northern Virginia. It's happening more and more places. The only places that have been an exception to the rule where they knew, sports owners knew better than to ask taxpayers, was California and New York City. Every place else in Middle Earth, we'd all say yes. Keep an eye on this one, because that is something that definitely is a local headline news type of thing. What else is up there? Jobs, all that other stuff. Yep, okay, I did that one. Tourism, I've kind of hit on this a little bit, a lot. This is something that I keep thinking about as it relates to the Dallas Mavericks. Mark Cuban's rich. And a lot of times we in the media, I find myself victim to this, will sit there and say, well, he's rich, he must be right. Just because he said it doesn't mean it's right, right? It's kind of like you tell your spouse that. Husbands, you know what I'm talking about. Just because you said it doesn't mean you're right. So Mark Cuban, 12 years ago, after the Dallas Mavericks went to the NBA Finals and won the championship, said, you know what? I'm not going to go out and spend all this money because I know what this new rule in the NBA is going to look like, and there's going to be a punitive salary cap tax if you go over the threshold. I know it. I see it. He was wrong. All these drunk owners who want to win basketball games went way over the tax threshold, and he wouldn't do it. He's like, oh my God, I didn't see that coming. Well, you were wrong. So now a few months ago, Mark Cuban sells the Dallas Mavericks to the Las Vegas Sands Corporation. Because in Mark's mind, the reason he's doing it is because the primary source of revenue for NBA franchises has been television broadcast rights revenue. And he said, it's getting ready to go down. Getting ready to go down? He said, yeah, it's getting ready to go down. So we're going to need different source of revenue for the Mavericks to be competitive. Sell it to the Las Vegas Sands. Why does the Las Vegas Sands want a pro basketball team? Because they want a gambling license whenever Dan Patrick leaves his job as lieutenant governor and gaming finally passes. And the Las Vegas Sands wants to be at the front of the line to say, we want a license because we're going to build a resort casino with an arena where Texas Stadium used to exist. He might be right. Well, I don't know if any of you guys have followed this now. The NBA is currently in broadcast negotiations with NBC and Amazon for a rights package that would eclipse $2.5 billion. Just because Mark said it doesn't mean he was right. He made $3.5 billion on the sale of the Mavericks. I think he's going to be okay. Sometimes you're wrong. But the evaluation, the one thing we have consistently missed on, and why sports remains such a front page story for all of us, is that sports, for better or for worse, right or wrong, misplaced priorities or no, continues to become a massive part of our daily routine. I mean, I don't know if any of you guys have followed. Have any of you guys had any chance to breathe since all this stuff started 2 months ago? There's a damn game every night. You're like, oh, it's another big one. My wife was telling me she had seen something where this guy was talking to his wife. We have to go to a bar where there's a game on. She's like, what are you talking about? The Masters just finished. He's like, no, the playoffs. And then football starts, and it just doesn't stop. And now that gaming has passed, and suddenly we're okay with gambling, it's only going to get bigger. And eventually these things, and I'm sure we've all seen it, the housing market's going to collapse. We're all going to die. We've been in a recession for 8 years now. I keep hearing that. I'm like, really? Well, I know this. Everybody's making money on it. And this thing keeps getting bigger and bigger. So a lot of 4 or 5 years ago, when the NBA players were taking a stand on Black Lives Matter, I remember listening, the NBA's dying, nobody's watching the NBA. No, really? Okay. Well, the arenas are all full, and the contract is now going to go to $2.5 billion. So where can I get a piece of that nobody's watching? We are, to the point where you almost say, well, I don't know if this is really healthy. Well, it's probably not, but that's where we are. And I don't think this is going to slow down anytime soon, especially now as women's sports, specifically the WNBA and women's professional soccer, continue to get bigger and bigger. And hopefully, it'll buy me a few more years at my job before I start volunteering my services to clean your pool and mow your yard. I think that's about it. This is the last one. You know, when we sang the national anthem a few minutes ago, probably feels like a couple of hours ago for you guys, this has been a topic of discussion that I've had with friends of mine for a while. Remember what a big deal it was 8 or 10 years ago when Colin Kaepernick took a knee? That was a huge deal. And it kind of died down, and then President Trump made a point of it, and he found something that he really could bang the drum on and create a lot of interest. It's very divisive. And I had this moment, and I've had this moment for a while. I thought, why are we playing the national anthem at a sporting event? Especially a professional sporting event. Like, why are we doing this? It's like, is this really appropriate? So I went down this very cynical, dark, jagged rabbit hole, and I thought, you know what, with the NFL, because I was at an NFL game when I was thinking about this, the NFL is basically McDonald's. Okay, it has 32 franchises. So we, as Dallas Cowboys fans, masochists as we might be, that's the equivalent of supporting the McDonald's on Bryant Irvin. And when they play the Kansas City Chiefs, you're supporting the McDonald's on Camp Bowie. That's what it is. It's a company softball game. And we're sitting there wearing jerseys, buying burgers and all that stuff, and identifying a good part of our, I don't want to say self-worth, but something we feel good about when the Cowboys win. That happens in September, October, November, not January. Let's just slow down there. Thank you, appreciate that. Just leave the tip jar. But that became I was like, well, why are we doing this? Like, why are we performing the national anthem for a McDonald's softball game? Like, what is this? Because you would see the members of the military out there. What people didn't know for a long time was the Defense Department, or whatever it was, paid the NFL to do that because it was advertising. The NFL took $5 million from them, whatever it was. Yeah, sure, go ahead. We'll take your money. And I thought, you know, there's a reason why we're doing it. Sports, those games, those are by far and away easily our biggest points of congregation in a community consistently. When else do you ever sing the national anthem outside of maybe this Rotary Club meeting? Do it at a game, right? And sometimes it is truly stirring. I've seen a few of them, I've seen a million of them, and there's a few that I remember, I'm like, wow, man, that's amazing. And when Colin Kaepernick did his silent protest, which I certainly had my views on, that became front page news, and it became a really divisive topic, obviously. And it was one of those where you can't win almost. It's so divisive. It was so blue and so red, and you're not a good American, and you're anti-military and all that other stuff. And whatever you think of it, I do believe this, as I went down that hole, it is ultimately a great thing if you can get 60,000 Americans, black, white, red, green, blue, red, whatever, to sit there for 2.5 minutes if they actually participate in singing the national anthem. I do. It's hard, because sometimes being an American is tough. You have to swallow a lot to make it work. But those are moments. Doesn't happen often. They don't. But every now and then it hits the right chord, and it can be a great unifying thing for a community. When I saw the Texas Rangers win the World Series in Arizona last year, a couple things crossed my mind. The first one is I'm probably going to die soon because the Rangers just won the World Series, and it just wasn't a good sign. So I went in my hotel room and I just shut all the windows and I made sure, there was no lightning. And then the other thing I thought was how many families, sons, dads, grandfathers, grandchildren, husbands, wives, buddies, have this unifying life experience over sharing in the long, arduous, painful, excruciating journey of a local baseball team winning the World Series and then celebrating that with a parade of like 700,000 people. It's misplaced priorities, it's screwed up, doesn't make a lot of sense, but as we get older, and certainly as it relates to the loss of your friend, there are moments where it's not necessarily about the team winning. It's about hanging out with your friends and having a great moment. And yeah, it can sometimes be damn expensive, and sometimes it will drive you crazy, but it's pretty great. And for a lot of people, and I say this as a sports fan, for a lot of people, whenever the Dallas Cowboys do win a Super Bowl again, which I keep thinking the law of averages, it's kind of like the monkey at the typewriter. Eventually, the monkey will write Hamlet. Eventually, Jerry Jones will fall into another Super Bowl because he will outlive all of us. He has more money, he can do it. I don't know, he may not even need to do it, because he didn't make a deal with God, he made it with Satan. And Satan's gonna keep him up here for as long as necessary. I have talked long enough, because this is the best part. Who wants to hear me talk more? Thank you. If anybody has any questions, yes, sir.
I'd be interested in your thoughts.
Somebody write that down. Somebody's interested in my thoughts.
So, NIL, before you're familiar with what that's done to college
Sure.
sports.
Yep.
Power 5 and NCAA just came to an agreement. Would be interested in your thoughts on how that's going to impact college sports.
Okay, so he asked about, if you didn't hear about it, about NIL, which is name, image, and likeness, NCAA legislation, which was designed to allow a college student athlete to make money basically as a product endorsement, as an advertiser, influencer, whatever else. And what it morphed into, because people got clever, where they said, oh, you know what, we're gonna create a collective, and we're gonna ask you, where'd you go to school? TCU, go Frogs. We're gonna ask Kurt for $100,000. And because he's a fan, you're like, yeah, I'll give you $100,000. What's it for? So we can pay college kids to win a football game so we can beat Houston in the regular season. What? Okay, go Frogs. Yeah, I'll do it. So that's what they did. And they started spraying, now because of Title IX, and you have to, if you give $5 to the quarterback, you got to give $5 to the swimmer. This got really expensive. So now universities panicked, but here's the brilliant part. The collective wasn't directly affiliated with the university that they were raising money for, because that's not a problem, even though that collective a lot of times is basically located directly across the street. So it got to be a huge mess. Basically, you were paying student athletes, you're paying kids to be the kicker at TCU. And I'm saying, when you're paying that kid and he misses a 30-yarder, you're like, I want my money back, right? Because now you know you're paying them directly. So now this has been a big, giant mess, and everybody's suing the NCAA, which has now turned into the Washington Generals in court. It's a very obscure joke. The Washington Generals are the team that played the Harlem Globetrotters and never won. So the NCAA now exists for one reason, to not get sued, because all it does is lose. So there's a couple of things going on in the last 4 to 5 years that the NCAA was ready for but wasn't ready for. One, kids, student athletes now can transfer wherever, whenever they want, no different than when you or I were in school. If we wanted to drop out in the middle of the semester at TCU and transferred to Texas, we could have. Well, student athletes for the longest time didn't have that power, or if they did, they couldn't play. And everybody in this room knows now, definitively, now that we're older, if you're good enough to play in college, your career is about ready to end. It's going to end at 22, probably, unless you're really good, and then maybe you might go make it pro. So now you've got all these young kids and these horrible, unscrupulous agents, shout out to the lawyers in the room, who are trying to make $500,000 for a basketball player. And the best part, there's no policing of the agents. The agents are making 20%. Here's my favorite one. I heard this story the other day about an agent who signed a kid to a contract, and the contract said, you're going to pay me 30% of whatever it is that you're making until you're 30, regardless of what your profession is. The kid could have been a school teacher. And I'm like, what drunk idiot signed that? He's 18, he didn't know. Parents don't know. I mean, the stories now are horrible. So what's going to happen with all this stuff is this. Eventually, Power 4, there's going to be about 60 schools. Hopefully TCU's one of those 60. There's going to be about 60 schools here in the next year or so, and it's already pretty much happened, that are going to agree to some kind of model of revenue sharing. And I'd expect about a 52-48 split, because that's pretty standard in pro sports. And then the tricky part is going to be what they define as revenue. That's very tricky, because a lot of times unions go to sleep on that one. But if they're union, that means they're an employee. And there are some places that they really want to be, some of these kids want to be an employee. Some of them don't even know. Most of these guys just want to go to school, chase girls, and play sports, not necessarily in that order. And what I think is going to happen is that those 60 schools or so are going to run things. And it's going to be okay. Game's going to be on Saturday. People are going to be gambling. I don't even want to think about the crisis that's coming, because that's coming down the line, about gambling. You know, you've got, I mean, everybody's just, it's coming, whether we want to admit it or not. And I think the transfer thing is here to stay. It's driving coaches crazy because they don't know who their roster is going to be. And it's going to be some form of minor leagues where a kid can go to school and get a degree. They can. It's not the pros. I want to be real clear on that, because I've said it before and I've talked to guys about this. An NCAA football player is not an NFL player. It's a different life. It just is. Now, it's a busy life, but an NCAA college player is not a pro. But I would imagine there's going to be some structure to these contracts. I would imagine they're going to fight for some form of a salary cap, because what these universities now are really looking for is cost certainty. They want to know, what do I have? That's why there's a salary cap in pro sports. They want to know what they have to hit and what their costs are every year, which makes sense. And I think that's coming. It might take a little while, but if there's one thing, and I'm sure maybe you guys have said it, you might have even have heard it, college sports is dying, it's all going to blow up, it's going to hell. No, it's not. It is making a fortune. Live sports is the driver behind network television right now and whatever streaming app we're watching. Game days are full. People are going to games getting drunk. The SEC has now turned into the Ivy League, because all these kids now are applying because they watch the games on Saturday and they think, wow, that's going to be amazing. And it's a lot of fun on Saturdays. What they don't realize is that those are 6 days a year. What about all the other days? So now Georgia, no one can get into Georgia now. Alabama has turned into Dartmouth, and that's the model. So, yes, it's a good one. But it's going to continue on, and I would imagine the next, because these lawsuits are going to take a while, I would imagine the next 8 to 12 months, you're going to get a clearer picture. But it's going to go on, and there'll be some changes, but as long as television and we keep spending $200 and $400 a ticket to watch this stuff, it's going to be fine. Kirk.
I got two questions. First is, you mentioned Title IX. Does that affect NIL?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Well,
if you're paying this person and it's a male, do you have to throw the same money at a female?
depends. It's a good question. So if it's Title IX, you have to give $5. Whatever you're paying the quarterback, you got to pay the same to the women's basketball player, right? So, and that's been about the whole thing with Title IX, which is whatever opportunities that you're extending to males, you have to do the females. And it's tough, but like I said, I'm a big supporter of it. Yes, especially because what the universities decided were, we don't want these paying for student athletes to be handled by anybody else. We need to handle this. So if they handle it, that means it's a university expense. And if it's a university expense, it's crazy. If you're paying the quarterback, yeah, let me think about it. You're paying the quarterback, so it's Josh Hoover. TCU's quarterback's gonna be Josh Hoover. Pick a number, it's $20,000 a month. I'm making these numbers up, I don't know what they are. And a lot of the numbers that you're hearing are inaccurate. Kids are lying. But let's say it's $20,000 a month. Okay, that's great. Probably gonna have to pay the men's golfer. Yeah, I mean, it's not just that women get the bad rap. There's a ton of men's sports out there nobody watches too. And so however they structure it, yeah.
The second question I had is in regards to the transfer portal and paying, it's pulled into conglomerates or corporations that are pushing the money out.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Now, what's to keep someone from saying, all right, we're going to bet early on this team losing this season, and then halfway through, buying a couple kids to go into the transfer portal?
Oh, it's already happening. So he was asking about if a team had a poor start to a season and a guy says, I'm done, I'm transferring, because we're having a bad season, they just quit on the year. That is happening.
I'm saying if it's a good team and
Good.
you want to tank it,
Because this is what's, yeah.
make the money on
Yeah,
the gambling.
so what's happening, the gambling thing, that's a different beast. But what's happening is that agents now who are not accredited, usually if you're gonna be an agent for an NFL, NHL, Major League Baseball, you have to have some license or accreditation. Usually they're lawyers. Both this college thing being, so unregulated, and that's what we're looking at is unregulated, is they'll call the kid. Let's say he calls a kid at TCU. Oh, I know, it did happen. There was a good football player at TCU, really good. And he kept getting offers while the season was going on, and he didn't want to leave. But the money that he was being offered was a lot by a big power SEC program, and he didn't want to leave because he liked it here. Well, his family's in a tough situation, and he plays the season, and he's like, sorry, coach, I gotta go. And he transferred. So, and then that's like the success story, because he went to another program and he'll play. The tragic stories, tragic's too strong of a word, the hard stories are the kid who's being told, hey, look, if you leave here, I got a spot for you at Syracuse, and you're gonna make $30,000 a month, and you're gonna get 25 minutes a game. So he puts his name in the transfer portal. Syracuse is like, what are you talking about? I have no idea who you are. And then he goes back to his old program, says, yeah, and they're like, sorry, man, we gave your scholarship to somebody else. So hopefully, and those things are gonna happen until they kind of get some structure and some rules. It'll happen, it'll take a while, it'll be a mess. And whatever solutions that are put in place, there'll be problems with it too. But did you have a question, sir?
Yes.
Yeah.
First of all, what was closest to Major League Sports was the Texas Motor Speedway.
Yep,
NASCAR, what's the future of NASCAR?
it's fine.
Stadium is much smaller.
It's going to be smaller. I mean, if you guys, we're all old enough to remember when NASCAR was like a southeast sport, right? That's kind of what it's come back to. In the 90s, it got insanely big. And so all these tracks were being built all over the United States because they could fill 125, 150,000 seat venues. That's insane. And if you look at it now, all across the United States, with the exception of one or two tracks, it's a niche sport now, but it's fine. It got too big, and you can't, the important thing, and I learned this from the NHL commissioner taught me this, he said, we compare ourselves to ourselves, and if you compare yourself against yourself and you can say, I'm getting better, or we're okay, then NASCAR's fine. It'll never be what it was. But if you can sell 40,000 tickets or 50,000 tickets to an event, and you've got TV rights and all that other stuff, you're fine. But it'll never be, the problem with TMS is there's too many seats, and now the amount of money required to remove those seats, you wouldn't do it. So it looks terrible on television. Like, oh, nobody's there. Well, yeah, nobody's there because you got 50,000 people in a 150,000 seat venue. That's the problem. It looks terrible on television. But, it's the one thing we've seen, I've consistently seen the last 2 or 3 years. I don't know how many of you guys have streaming options. There's 8 billion things to watch. There's not enough hours in a life to watch all of it. The one hook and why sports continues to do so well is that live sports, people will not pause and watch later. They're going to watch it live, or they're not going to watch it at all. So in terms of a concentration of eyeballs, big time sports is number one, and that's why NASCAR is doing fine. Sir?
So when you were When you were a boy, who was your favorite baseball player and why?
Oh, wow, this is cool. Pete Rose. I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio. We moved to Indiana when I was a kid. And it's funny, when I was a Pete Rose fan, he was at the end of his career. And, you know, I was devastated when he was kicked out of baseball. I was devastated. I cried. I was in high school. I don't know how old I was. I can't remember what year, but I cried. I'm like, no, I believe Pete. Well, years later, I got older, and then I learned who Pete really was. And, but I love Pete, because everybody did. Everybody, I mean, but when you learned about who he was, you're like, yeah, I don't know about this. But my one favorite, I met Pete one time. I was at a casino, and it was in 1996. Right. Yeah, right. So I was in graduate school at TCU, and I had just lost $50 that I didn't have, and I am bummed. So I'm at the MGM Grand, and somebody says, hey, Pete Rose is there. I'm like, what? You gotta be kidding me. And remember, I'm young, I hadn't done this job for a while, and yeah, I can get a little starstruck. It says, Pete's here. I'm like, really? You gotta be kidding. So I'm walking around the casino, I'm like, I'll be damned. There's Pete Rose, and he looks like a bag of garbage. Fat, old, hair's disheveled, looks like he hadn't slept in a week, and he's sitting with some girl who is not his wife, fiance, or daughter. Which, as I get older now, no judgment. So I'm like, oh, I gotta get an autograph or something. So I run around looking for anything. I'm like, oh, there it is. So I get the one thing that I can find. I'm at a casino. It's not like you're gonna find memorabilia. So I go get this thing. I'm like, okay, I'll do it. And I'm scared to death. I'm like, Mr. Rose, I'm from Cincinnati. I was the biggest fan of yours, my family. It would mean so much to me if you sign this. Grabs it, signs it. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Nods. I'm gone. It was a MGM parlay card. Yes. So he signed it, and I held on to it for years because I knew what I wanted to frame it with, and it was the Sports Illustrated where he got busted for gambling, and I framed it, and that was my favorite player. But now, as I'm older, as an adult, I would say, yeah, Pete was white trash dirtbag. Yes, sir.
So relative to having, not having a marquee sports team for our side, I'm interested in the perspective that Monte and his folks now that we have more high school and college athletic events that draw from around the country, such as gymnastics,
Yep.
all those kinds of things. We have more than any other city in America, and that does know that it's money without doing.
Yeah, and there's a lot. So what he's talking about is, so we don't have a team, but we have a lot of athletic events, and Mayor Parker, she and I have talked about that, and that's a driver for hotel rentals, hotel occupancy, restaurants. It's small. It's not a big number, right? Because we've got Dickies, and I've said this to anybody who hasn't here, Dickies is the best facility I've been in. And I'm biased because it's 10 minutes from my house, but Dickies is a phenomenal arena. And I know the city put up some money with that, with Mr. Bass to make that happen. But the venue is small, right? We're not the American Airlines Center. It's not an 18,000 seat venue, but it is good. It's almost perfect for an event like the NCAA Gymnastics Championships that we've had. That's been good. Is it full? No, because it's gymnastics. And the only gymnastic events that fill up are the Olympics. Oh, I'm sure it does.
Of course it makes us money. I don't think we've ever said that we have more than anybody else.
I don't even know, that's one of those, well, no, you could be splitting hairs on that one. It's kind of how you define it. But, when it comes to that, and in terms of, as Fort Worth looks to the future, I know TCU and its potential new leadership is looking at some things. I know the presence of Texas A&M with its law school here in downtown, somebody's a fan. That creates an element that is interesting. There's some, I don't want to say complicated, but I think TCU has some ambitions. And the truth of the matter is as it relates to college sports, TCU's in a tough spot. It's certainly proven it can be competitive. But the hard part to this, it's not about being competitive. It's about how many eyeballs that you can bring, how many T-shirts can you sell, how many hotels, how many seats can you fill, and all that stuff. And that TCU has done what it has done in this era of college athletics, in my mind, since 1980 on, is the most successful, surprising college sports story that we've had, because it was nothing. And for it to be where it is, I'll never forget when I was at the national championship game, and there's Georgia, and there's TCU, and I'm like, oh my God, I cannot believe this. I don't really remember the next 3 hours, but I really want to thank you guys for having me here today. It's been a pleasure. If anybody wants to give me money, I'm more than willing.
Thank you very much, Mac. Just like your columns, always interesting. Actually, even better in person, I got to say. So, the Rotary Club, one of our big things is the eradication of polio. Since the mid-'80s, Rotary has been on the forefront. Back then, we had over 250,000 new cases every year of polio worldwide. As of last year, we had 13. So we are making a big dent in it. We are this close to it being a dead disease. In honor of you speaking today, our club is making a donation to the Rotary Polio Plus Fund. And this is a memento. Thank you very much, sir. All right, got a couple closing announcements. Number one, the International Committee's project, hygiene and food kits, have been purchased and they're being distributed today. Thank you to everyone who participated. Number two, dues are due. Today's the last day to avoid a $50 penalty. So get those in. Aurora can help. 5 p.m. is the deadline. Number three, Board of Directors meeting, Rotary Office, Suite 305, immediately after this meeting. Next week, Chris Cobbler, OK Carter, Wes Turner, and past President J.R. Labby doing the Fort Worth Report, a panel discussion. And our final news, I have service announcements for Richard Knight. His funeral service will be Saturday, June 8th, 1 p.m. at Wrestling Funeral Home, the Wildwood Chapel, over in Dallas, Texas. Aurora will get those details into the rotograph or to y'all in the next week or so. And with that, I hope everyone has a great weekend, stays dry, stays cool. This meeting is adjourned.